My name is Vel. I am, or I was, a mid-level processing officer for the Outer Tribunal. That is a fancy way of saying I push exiles through a door and then sign a form confirming that yes, they went through the door, and no, they are not coming back. It is not glamorous work. Nobody dreams of growing up to be the person who hands a condemned soul their last meal and then watches them get launched into the sky. But the pay was steady, the hours were predictable, and the screaming usually stopped after the pod sealed. You take the small comforts where you can find them. That morning I had a headache, 2 stale ration cubes, and a docket with one name on it. The name was Theo Hark. Species human, crime laughing. I am not exaggerating for effect. I want you to understand that I would love to be exaggerating. But the official charge, stamped in glowing red on the docket, read as follows. The accused did willfully and audibly laugh during the council's hour of sacred silence, and when instructed to stop, did not stop, and when asked why he would not stop, said, and I am quoting the transcript here, because somebody's hat looks like a sad little mushroom and I am only made of so much willpower. Now, I have processed murderers, I have processed thieves, frauds, and one fellow who tried to sell the moon to 3 different buyers at the same time. I had never in 80 cycles of service processed somebody for being unable to keep a straight face. But the council member with the unfortunate hat was named Lord Grevick, and Lord Grevick had the kind of pride that crumples like wet paper, and so Lord Grevick wanted blood. Not just any blood, either. He wanted a spectacle. He wanted the human gone in a way that would make every other species in the sector remember to take their hats seriously. So they chose Planet 9 Grell. You may not have heard of it, and if you have, you probably heard the nickname instead, the Meat Grinder. That is what the survey crews called it. Back when there were survey crews, back before the survey crews stopped coming home. 9 Grell is a death world in the truest sense of the word. The atmosphere does not whisper, it screams. The gravity changes its mind depending on the time of day. The plants have opinions, and the opinions are violent. And the wildlife, oh the wildlife, you can see the predators from orbit, not the herds, the individual predators. That is how large they are. No exile sent to 9 Grell had ever lasted past 40 hours. Most did not last 4. The record held by a stubborn reptilian smuggler named Oss was 38 hours and change, and most of that was him hiding in a hole while something with too many legs tried to dig him out. The council loved 9 Grell precisely because nobody survived it. It made their cruelty feel clean. They were not killing anyone, you see. They were simply opening a door and letting the planet do the rest. So that is where Theo Hark was going. I met him in the holding bay an hour before the drop. I expected tears. I am, after years of practice, very good with tears. I keep a little dispenser of calming mist on my belt for exactly that purpose. What I was not prepared for was the human sitting cross-legged on the bench, eating one of my stale ration cubes, looking up at me with an expression of mild, friendly curiosity. Hey, he said, quick question. Is there going to be Wi-Fi where I'm going, or should I lower my expectations? I stared at him. I had no idea what Wi-Fi was. I still do not, fully. But I understood, somewhere in the pit of my processing officer's soul, that this was not a creature who had accepted his death. This was a creature who had simply decided that his death was going to be inconvenient, and was budgeting for it accordingly. I told him there would be no Wi-Fi. I told him there would be nothing, in fact, except teeth and weather. I told him this was the part of the day where most exiles begin to come apart, and that there was no shame in it, and that I had missed if he needed missed. He thought about this for a moment. Then he said, "Can I keep the datapad?" The datapad was a personal logging device, recovered from his belongings, cracked across one corner. By regulation it should have been confiscated. But there is a clause, buried in the exile code, that allows a condemned soul one item of no military value, for the comfort of their final hours. I do not know why I said yes. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the headache had worn down whatever part of me still followed every rule. Maybe I just liked that he asked nicely. "Keep it," I said. "It won't help you." He grinned at me. It was an unsettling expression on a human, all those flat little teeth on display at once. "Everything helps," he said. "You just have to use it for the right thing." I did not know what that meant. By the end of the week, neither did the rest of the galaxy, and they could not stop watching anyway. The drop chamber was full when we walked in. This was Lord Grevick's doing. He had invited the whole council to watch, along with half the upper court, and they had set up a viewing gallery behind reinforced glass, with little floating trays of refreshments because nothing builds an appetite like watching a man die. There was a betting pool. I saw the numbers on the wagering board. Most of the money was on the under 4-hour bracket. A few brave optimists had put a little on under 20. One lonely soul, way at the bottom, had wagered a single credit on the human surviving a full day. The odds next to that bet were so long they had to use scientific notation. I learned later that the lonely soul was me. I do not remember placing the bet. I think part of me did it out of spite. They strapped Theo into the descent pod. It is a cramped, ugly thing, all padding and restraints, built for one passenger and a one-way trip. Through the open hatch I watched him settle in, datapad clutched to his chest like a child with a toy. The council jeered. Lord Grevick gave a little speech about the price of disrespect, and the dignity of hats, and the mercy of a quick lesson. Nobody listened. They were watching the human, and the human, right before the hatch sealed, looked through the glass, found Lord Grevick's face in the crowd, and said the last words anyone expected. Still a sad little mushroom, by the way. Best of luck with it. Then the hatch shut, and the pod dropped, and 9 Grell swallowed him whole. The viewing gallery had a live feed, 2 angles, one from the pod's external camera, one from a recovery drone that would shadow the exile from a safe distance, recording everything for the tribunal archive. The archive footage is meant to be private. It is meant to be a record of justice served. It is meant to be boring. For the first 90 seconds it was. The pod tore through the screaming atmosphere, lights flickering, the whole frame shaking. It punched through a layer of orange cloud and came out over a landscape that genuinely made one of the younger court attendants faint. Mountains like broken teeth, a forest that moved when there was no wind, a river the color of a fresh wound, and things moving through all of it. Large things, patient things. The pod hit the ground hard, in a clearing at the edge of the moving forest. The restraints released, the hatch blew, and out climbed Theo Hark, coughing, blinking, swaying on his feet, soft and clawless and entirely out of his element. The whole gallery leaned forward. This was the moment they had paid to see. It took the Gorath 19 seconds to find him. I should describe a Gorath, because you have probably never seen one and you should be grateful. It is the apex predator of that region, which on 9 Grell is a very competitive title. 6 legs, 2 of them tipped with hooks, a mouth that opens in 4 directions like a flower made of knives, skin the texture of old armor, and it is fast, much faster than something that size has any right to be, fast enough that the recovery drone struggled to keep it in frame. It came out of the forest at a full charge, straight at the human, and the entire viewing gallery held its breath as one. Lord Grevick actually stood up. Someone in the under 4-hour bracket started celebrating early. Theo turned, saw the thing coming, and did not run. That is the part nobody could explain afterward. He did not run. Running was the obvious choice, the natural choice, the choice every species in the galaxy would have made. Instead he went very still, watching, his head tilted, like he was studying a strange piece of art. At the last possible instant when the Gorath lunged, he stepped to the side, not far, just enough. The thing's momentum carried it past, hooks tearing the ground where he had been standing. It wheeled around for another pass. He sidestepped again, and again. Each time he watched it. Each time he learned a little more. He learned that it led with the left hooks. He learned that it could not turn quickly at speed. He learned that the 4-way mouth, terrifying as it was slow to close. After the 4th pass, the Gorath was tired and confused and slightly embarrassed, if such a thing is possible for a creature made of knives. It backed off, snorting, circling, trying to figure out why this small, soft snack would not hold still and be eaten. And Theo Hark, breathing hard, scratched and filthy and very much alive, pulled out his cracked datapad, looked into it and spoke. Okay. Day 1. Meta-local. The gallery had gone completely silent. Big fella, 6 legs, lots of mouth, real committed to the bit. Calling him a Gorath because that's the sound he makes when he misses. Gorath. Hear it? Gorath. In the gallery nobody breathed. Strong opener, genuinely scary, but predictable. And honestly, the breath. The breath is a war crime. I'm gonna have to dock points for that. He squinted at the creature, which squinted back. 3 out of 5, 3 solid stars. Would have been 4, but I can smell him from here and I have standards. I want to be clear about what happened in that room. A galactic court, the highest authority in the sector. All those proud, important faces pressed up against the glass to watch a man die. and the man had instead given the monster a rating out of 5, like it was a meal that had arrived slightly cold. Lord Grevik sat back down very slowly. The under 4-hour bracket stopped celebrating, and somewhere in the back of my chest, against all professional judgment, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. I wanted to see what he would do next. What he did next was survive. And then he did it again. And then he made a habit of it. The pattern set in fast. Everything on 9grel wanted to kill Theo Hark, and the planet had an enormous menu of ways to try. He met every single one of them the same way. He studied it, he survived it, and then he raided it. There was the swarm. A cloud of small flying things that spat a venom capable of stripping armor down to bare metal. He found a patch of wet clay near the wounded-colored river, coated himself in it, and walked through the swarm while the venom hissed harmlessly off the dried shell. "Spitters," he announced afterward, peeling clay off his arms. Annoying, loud, real overcommitted to the venom thing, which respect the focus, but it's a one-trick situation. 2 stars. The clay was free, guys. The clay was right there. There was the thing in the long grass. He never gave it a proper name because he never saw all of it at once, just teeth, rows and rows of teeth moving through the grass like a tide. He outmaneuvered it by climbing a rock spire it could not follow him up, and he sat at the top, eating something he had foraged, narrating down at it. "I genuinely don't know what you are. You might just be teeth. Are you just teeth? You could be just teeth. That's a 4. That's a strong 4. Mysterious, committed, slightly horrifying. I respect a creature that knows what it's about." And then there was the screamer. I will not describe the sound it made because the recovery drone's audio sensors blew out trying to record it, and 3 members of the court needed medical attention just from the playback. It was a frequency that liquefies bone. It should have killed him instantly. Instead, the footage shows him jamming wads of clay into his own ears, dropping flat behind a ridge, and waiting it out with his eyes screwed shut and his mouth moving in what the lip readers later confirmed was very colorful human profanity. When it finally passed, he sat up, ears stuffed with clay, and held up the datapad with a shaking hand. "That was rude. 1 star, 1. That's not a predator, that's a personal attack. I have a headache now. You gave me a headache, you absolute nightmare. 1 star, and I'm telling everyone." The betting pool by this point had quietly collapsed. There was no point. The brackets were all gone. He had blown past every one of them. The wagering board just displayed his survival time climbing higher and higher, and the lonely single-credit bet at the bottom that nobody wanted to talk about. I should mention how the footage got out because that is where everything truly turned. The archive feed was private. Tribunal eyes only. But somebody, and to this day no one has admitted to it, copied a clip. Just one. The Gorath, and the 3-star rating and the line about the breath. They put it onto the open Galactic network, probably as a joke, probably expecting it to be forgotten in an hour. It was not forgotten in an hour. Within a day it had crossed every species line in the sector. Within 3 days the number of viewers had more digits than the betting odds. The galaxy, it turned out, had never seen anything like this. Other condemned souls begged. Other condemned souls wept and cursed and died. This one rated the wildlife. He was funny. He was calm. He was, against the backdrop of a world built specifically to murder him, having what could only be described as a moderately irritating but otherwise survivable camping trip. People started waiting for the next clip. Then they started making things. There were carved figurines of the Gorath with 3 little stars over its head. There were songs. A merchant 2 systems over started selling clay, actual clay, marketed as the human secret, and made a small fortune before anyone pointed out that it was just clay. Children mimicked him. They would chase each other around and then stop and pretend to hold up a datapad and announce a rating, and the loser would have to be a 1-star screamer. The council was, to put it gently, losing its mind. Lord Grevik had wanted a lesson. He had gotten a celebrity. The whole point of 9grel was that it erased people, quietly and totally, and instead it had taken the human he hated most and broadcast him to the entire sector as a folk hero. Every clip was an advertisement for the thing he had failed to do, which was shut Theo Hark up. And I, may the record show, had been quietly reassigned. My new full-time duty was to monitor the exile feed and file reports. I think they meant it as a punishment, since everyone knew I had let him keep the datapad. The joke was on them. It was the best assignment I had ever had. I started bringing better snacks. I started talking to the screen. I started, and this is the part I am least proud of and most fond of, rooting for him. By the end of the first week, Theo Hark had stopped merely surviving Ninegrel. He had started running it. He found a cave high in the Broken Tooth Mountains with one narrow entrance he could block at night. He learned which plants would feed him and which would feed on him. He built things. He made a spear out of a shed Gorath hook and a length of fibrous vine, and a kind of armor out of the shell plates of dead spitters, and a shelter framed with the long curved ribs of something that had been very large and was now very dead. He charted the moving forest's moods. He learned the rhythm of the river. He turned a planet that had killed everyone who touched it into, of all things, a home, and he was not alone anymore either. There was a small creature, about the size of his forearm, with 6 eyes and a fluffy tail and a bite that could, the survey records confirmed, paralyze a beast 100 times its size. It was a juvenile, separated from whatever passed for its family. It started following him around the 3rd day, mostly because he kept dropping bits of food and pretending not to notice. By the 5th day it was sleeping in his shelter. By the 7th he had named it Pym, and Pym had decided that Theo Hark belonged to it. The footage of him with Pym broke records all over again. There is one clip, and I have watched it more times than I will admit, where Theo is sitting outside his shelter at what passes for dusk on Ninegrel, and Pym is curled up on his knee and he is talking quietly into the datapad while the little creature's 6 eyes slowly close. Pym. 5 stars, obviously. 5 out of 5, no notes. Perfect creature, would die for. Mildly venomous, which honestly just makes the trust feel more earned. He scratched the fluffy tail. Best thing on this whole murder planet, and he was just sitting here the whole time. 5 stars, Pym. You're the only one who gets a 5. The council scientists were beside themselves. They convened panels, they wrote papers. How was a human, a species with no natural weapons, no venom, no armor, no significant strength, dominating a Deathworld that had defeated armored, venomous, armed exiles in a matter of hours? They ran simulations, they argued. And the answer they kept circling, the answer none of them wanted to write down because it sounded too simple to be science, was this. The human was not stronger than Ninegrel, he was just more curious than he was afraid. Every other exile had looked at the planet and seen the thing that would kill them. Theo Hark had looked at the exact same planet and seen a list of creatures he had not met yet. That, it turns out, makes all the difference. Lord Grevik could not stand it. So he did something that I will never forgive him for, and that the rest of the galaxy never forgave him for either, once they found out. He sent the Vor-Ma. I need you to understand what the Vor-Ma is, and I need you to understand that the Council does not talk about it. It is not catalogued. It is not on any survey. It is the thing that ate the survey crews. It is the reason there are no more survey crews. The Vor-Ma is an apex among apexes, a titan that the predators of Ninegrel themselves avoid. A creature so old and so large that the planet seems to rearrange itself to get out of its way. There is exactly one of it, as far as anyone knows. The Council keeps it sealed in a deep canyon on the planet's dark side, behind containment they pretend does not exist, for exactly the kind of emergency that a humiliating folk hero represents. Grevik opened the canyon, and he did it quietly, off the record, telling no one, because even he knew that what he was doing was not justice. It was murder dressed up as a wildlife encounter. He wanted the human dead, and he wanted the galaxy to watch the death and finally stop laughing. The feed caught all of it. The ground began to shake. Pym woke first, every eye snapping open, fur standing on end, and bolted for the shelter. Theo felt it next, the tremor coming up through the rock, steady and enormous and getting closer. He stood, he looked toward the dark side of the mountains, and for the first time in the entire broadcast, the entire week, the first time the galaxy had ever seen it, the human looked afraid. The Vor-Ma came over the ridge like a moving mountain. I will not pretend I can describe it well. The drone could barely hold it in frame. It was vast beyond the scale of anything that should be alive, a darkness with a mouth, and when it roared the audio sensors did not blow out, they simply gave up, and the gallery feed went silent except for the rumble coming up through the floor of the court itself, 2 planets away. Theo Hark stood in the open with a spear made of garbage and a creature the size of a continent bearing down on him, and the galaxy watched, and nobody breathed, and I gripped the edge of my desk so hard I cracked it. And then he did the thing that I will be telling people about until the day I die. He did not fight it. You cannot fight the Vor-Ma. He knew that. Instead he ran, but he ran in a direction, a chosen direction, a planned direction. He ran for the wounded-colored river, the one the spitters nested along, the one the teeth-in-the-grass thing hunted near, the one the whole local ecosystem he had spent a week mapping happened to converge upon. He had not just been surviving Ninegrell, he had been studying it. He knew where everything lived, he knew what everything feared, and he knew because he had paid attention when no one else ever had, that there were things on this planet that even the Vorma did not enjoy stepping on. He led the Titan straight through the spitter nests. The swarm rose in a screaming venomous cloud and hit the Vorma in its eyes. He led it across the territory of the teeth in the grass, which struck at the only soft places on a creature otherwise made of stone. He led it into the narrow canyon where the bone-liquefying Screamer lived, and the Screamer, furious at the intrusion, let loose the sound that had earned Theo's only one-star review, and for once that terrible noise was aimed at something that deserved it. The Vorma, blinded, bitten, and assaulted by a frequency that even a Titan cannot ignore, did something no record had ever shown it do. It stopped. It turned, and it went back over the ridge, back toward its canyon, back into the dark, deciding that whatever this small, soft thing was, it was simply not worth the trouble. The human had not beaten the monster. He had introduced it to all his other monsters, and let them sort it out. When it was over, Theo Hark stood at the edge of the river, shaking, covered in clay and blood, and worse, with Pym peeking out from inside his shell plate armor. He was breathing in great ragged gulps. He looked like he might fall down. And then, with a hand that would not stop trembling, he lifted the cracked datapad one more time. "Vorma," he said, and his voice cracked, and he laughed. A small, broken, disbelieving laugh. 5 stars, 5 out of 5. Genuinely, sincerely, the most incredible thing I have ever seen. Absolute unit, perfect monster, no notes. He wiped his face. Would not fight again. Would not fight again for any amount of money. Please, please never come back. 5 stars. You're a 5-star nightmare, and I love this planet, and I want to go home now. And then he sat down in the dirt and held his little venomous friend and laughed until the laughing turned into something quieter, and the drone mercifully looked away. That was the moment I stopped being a tribunal officer. Oh, I kept the uniform on for a few more days, but something in me had finished. I had watched a man get sent to die for laughing, and I had watched him survive everything, and then I had watched the most powerful person in the sector secretly unleash a sealed Titan to murder him for the crime of being too well liked. And I had filed reports about it. I had been the quiet, obedient hand that signed the forms. I was done signing the forms. I copied the canyon logs, the real ones, the ones with Lord Grevik's personal authorization code on the order that opened the Vorma's seal, off the record, with no council vote, no trial, no anything. The order that proved the whole sector's highest authority had tried to murder its most famous citizen out of wounded pride over a hat, and then I did the only thing I could think to do that he could not undo. I put it on the open network, right next to the latest clip. For everyone, the galaxy, which had spent a week falling in love with Theo Hark, did not take the news gently. I will spare you the politics, because politics is boring and this story is not. What matters is that the outrage was instant and total and far too large for even the council to ignore. The same network that had carried the clips now carried the truth. And the truth was that the people meant to dispense justice had instead tried to feed a folk hero to a monster to save face. Lord Grevik went from feared to despised in the span of a single rotation. Crowds gathered, demands were made, and the council, that proud and ancient body, did the math and realized that the only way to survive the storm was to do the one thing they had sworn no exile would ever get. They brought him back. The retrieval ship that went down to Ninegrell was the first vessel to ever land there on purpose and intend to leave. I was on it. I had requested the assignment, and in the chaos no one thought to deny me. We found him at his cave in the Broken Tooth Mountains, standing on a ridge, spear in hand, Pym on his shoulder, watching us come down with an expression I could not read. He let us approach. He listened while the retrieval officer, nervous and formal, explained that his sentence had been overturned, that he was free, that he was in fact something of a hero now, and would he please come with us? Theo Hark looked at the ship. He looked at the planet that had tried so hard to kill him and had instead become the only place that had ever really suited him. And then he looked at me, and I do not know how he recognized me, but he did. The officer who let him keep the datapad. He grinned that unsettling flat-toothed grin. "Took you long enough," he said. "I was about to give the place 4 stars and settle down." He came with us, but he made us wait while he gathered his things, the spear and the armor and a pouch of forage supplies, and he made very sure that Pym came too, tucked safe inside his jacket, 6 eyes blinking at the strange new ship. 5 stars, he had said. The only 5. He was not leaving that behind. They held a ceremony when we returned. The council had to. The whole sector was watching, and the whole sector wanted to see the human who had survived the unsurvivable, and the council needed very badly to look like they had been on his side the entire time. They cleaned him up. They put him on a platform. They gathered, all of them in their robes and their pride, the same faces that had pressed against the glass to watch him die. And now they smiled and applauded and pretended. Lord Grevik was made to stand at the front. Stripped of most of his power by then, kept around only so the public could watch him squirm. He still had the hat. I do not know why. Maybe spite. Maybe it was the only dignity he had left. And Theo Hark stood before the assembled council of the entire sector, the body that had condemned him, the most powerful beings in the known reach of the stars, all of them watching, all of them waiting to see what the famous human would say. He reached into his jacket. Pym poked out one curious eye, and he pulled out the cracked datapad. The same one, the same scratched corner, and he held it up the way the whole galaxy had watched him do 100 times, and he looked the council up and down, slowly taking his time the way he had once studied a charging Goroth. Right, he said. Let's do this properly. You could have heard a pin drop across 2 systems. The Council of the Outer Tribunal, he said, and he let it hang there. Reviewing my stay, sentenced me to death for laughing at a hat, sent a sealed titan to murder me when that didn't take. Hospitality? 0. Welcome gift? A planet trying to eat me. Customer service? Genuinely the worst I have ever experienced, and I've been eaten at, screamed at, and spat on by things that don't have names. He tilted his head, but he let the word land. The wildlife was incredible. Best wildlife in the galaxy, bar none. Met a Goroth, met the teeth, met a 5-star nightmare the size of a mountain, met the best little creature in existence, and I'm keeping him, by the way. That's not up for discussion. Pym chirped, as if on cue. So, final rating. He looked straight at Lord Grevik and at the sad little mushroom of a hat, and he smiled. 2 stars. 2. And both of them are for the animals. He lowered the datapad. The silence held for one more heartbeat. And then somewhere in the watching crowds, somebody laughed, and then somebody else, and then the whole sector was laughing, the way they had been laughing all week. The laugh that had started this entire thing, the exact crime he had been sentenced to die for. Only now there were too many of them to banish. You cannot exile a galaxy. I left the tribunal not long after. There did not seem to be much point in pushing exiles through a door anymore, not after I had watched one walk back through it and rate the people who built it. Last I heard, Theo Hark had a ship of his own, and a small venomous creature riding shotgun, and a habit of visiting worlds that everyone else called too dangerous to land on. And everywhere he went, he kept the log. He kept rating things, the death worlds, the monsters, the impossible, terrible, beautiful corners of the galaxy that everyone else had only ever run from. Because that is the thing about humans, and it took me far too long and one ridiculous, stubborn, laughing little exile to understand it. The rest of us look at a world built to kill us and we see the end of the story. They look at the very same world, the teeth and the venom and the screaming sky, and they see something else entirely. They see a place they haven't reviewed yet. 2 stars for the council. 5 for the wildlife. And the galaxy, may it never recover, is still laughing.